So this video is going out to those who are like, I like the whole body weight calisthenics thing, but what about quantification? When it comes to weightlifting, it seems so nice and objective where it's like you've got a certain number of reps and sets and you've got a certain amount of weight so you know for sure that you're making progress. But meanwhile, a lot of stuff, especially with progressive calisthenics and suspension calisthenics, can seem much more subjective, like how much weight you got on one arm or what do you have for an angle when you're doing tricep extensions on straps. It's a little harder to put a number to it, so therefore, how do you quantify it? Well, of course, there's some aspects of calisthenics that are pretty easy to quantify, like weighted calisthenics, especially when you're using something like the plate-loaded Kensui weight vest. So if I'm doing regular dips and then I go to a weighted dip, well, that's 25 extra pounds I got on my chest, so it's a quantifiable increase in resistance. And sometimes other pieces of equipment have quantifiable metrics you can adjust as well, like on my body weight master here, if you're using a Smith machine, and I've got my tricep extensions, and then I move it down 2 notches, and then I've effectively increased the load on my hands. And even though there may not be a numerical quantification on the distance here, I still know it's down 2 notches and I can write that in my workout log. But let's take a real honest look at what's truly going on with things, because when it comes to weightlifting and strength training in general, we've got weight and we've got reps. But fundamentally, it's not weight and reps that's important for creating a stimulus to build muscle and strength. It's time and tension in the muscles, of which weight and reps are very closely correlated to it, but it's not quite exactly the same thing. And that's because there's also a lot of subjective aspects of resistance and time that are going to be controlling, like range of motion, body position, your speed and tempo, and even just your ability to shift weight around throughout your body, like to the front, to the back, to the left, and to the right as you're doing your exercises. And it's the use of some of these subjective variables that can make a massive difference in the stimulus you're creating. Because if I do my push-ups with a shorter range of motion, that's going to be a lot easier than if I use a full range of motion and I'm putting a slight pause at the bottom. Also, if I'm doing something like archer push-ups and I'm fairly close with my hands, and then I go with a much wider, it's kind of hard to quantify that, even though I'm certainly getting a lot more resistance on my left arm to hopefully produce a lot more tension in my chest, shoulders, and triceps. So you can see the pickle we're in, is these things can make a big difference in whether or not you're getting the muscle to work hard enough, but they're really hard to put a number to. So if we don't have a number to it, do we really know if we're able to make progress or how we're making progress over the course of our training? Now, a lot of times these concerns are based on a bit of a myth in, well, science in general, but especially within our fitness culture, is that without numbers, human beings are completely in the dark and absolutely blind to what's going on around them. Kind of like if I went outside and I was like, gee, I wonder if it's hot out, I'd have no way of knowing if it was hot whatsoever until I looked at the temperature on my phone or a thermometer. I was like, oh, it's 108 degrees here in Denver. Oh gosh, it's hot. No, of course not. We have the ability to be aware of these subjective variables as we adjust them. So if I'm doing my tricep extensions and I back up a couple inches so that I'm getting a bigger range and I'm getting more weight on my hands, I know there's not a number that I can put to that, but I can certainly feel that my triceps are now working quite a bit harder. And the importance of these subjective variables is certainly not exclusive to calisthenics, because even when we're looking at weight training, we may be able to say, okay, I'm doing a certain number of reps with this weight for squats, but then my squats with a much heavier weight look like this, even though in my logbook, I might be looking like I'm doing well. But am I really making the muscles work that much harder and doing a more effective form of the exercise? So once again, this is another reminder of how calisthenics training is just another form of weightlifting, and that the principles and the rules of getting bigger and stronger with calisthenics are exactly the same of regular weightlifting. Because yes, weight and reps matter, But also these subjective variables matter in both calisthenics and with weight training. We want to make sure we're not having some compensatory habits where we're compensating these subjective variables in order to bring these up, and in the long run actually hindering what's most important, which is time and muscle tension. And lastly, there's that whole, well, how do I know if I'm making progress? How do I know if I'm working a muscle harder? Well, to that I say that when you step up and push your muscles from one type of technique into another type of technique, it should be very obvious, even if you don't have numbers attached to it. If you're used to doing your archer push-ups like this, and then you're really getting out there, and you're like, wow, that is so much harder than what I'm used to, well, there's your answer. Because in order to make progress, we don't need a number to go up. We just need to have an established baseline of this is how I normally exercise the muscle to so much time and tension. And then you're like, well, instead of 10, I'm gonna do 15. Instead of out there, I'm gonna do this. Holy smokes, that is a heck of a lot more than I'm used to. And that should be pretty self-evident of progression. And the next $1 million question is, well, when do you progress your training? For that, I made this video here, click on that. And of course, this one here can also give you a little bit more information on how to progress with calisthenics training. Thank you very much for watching. Like it and share it if you got value out of this. And as always, be fit and live free.